Welcome to episode 53 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing Greg Francis. Greg is a writer and director and recently completed a cool thriller script called Poker Night. It took him nearly 10 years to get this movie made, and it's a real testament to perseverance, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast. Over on YouTube, I would like to thank Ginger Shine and 1600 Watch who left me nice comments on episode 51. Thank you guys for those. I always look at these comments, so if you have a question or comment about anything, please don't hesitate to leave it on the YouTube page. YouTube has a nice commenting system, so it's easy for me to look at the comments that are specific to an episode, and then I can respond to them. And on Facebook, thank you Juan Carlos Abeti, who liked episode 51, and thank you Sandra Campbell and Sylvester Sibani, who liked the SYS Facebook page. You can find our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/sellingyourscreenplay. Our Facebook page is growing nicely, so if you use Facebook, please do go ahead and like us. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts and then just look for episode number 53. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Again, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with writer-director Greg Francis. Here is the interview. Welcome, Greg, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career, kind of how you got started in the entertainment industry, eventually got to the point where you wrote and direct Poker Night.
Yeah. It's a long, long road to get there. Back when I was a child, I went to film school, a little school in Virginia for my master's, and sort of fell into film through theater in college and started making some shorts and really enjoyed it. So went to film school and made a film that did pretty well. This is a long time ago when there wasn't a million films being made. So we won 13, 14 contests all around the world and got an Emmy and placed in the TV Academy, the Film Academy.
And what kind of film was it? Was it a documentary, a feture film, a fictional film?
No,
what kind of film was it?
It was a film noir, it'd be like kind of Airplane-ish in a certain sense. It was like a broad film noir. It wasn't a parody, I guess. So it was comedy, but had a little bit of serious stuff. But I was in Virginia and nobody cared really. So the next 2 years I gripped for a year on shoots, and then I started art directing for commercials. And finally, 2 years out, and I was just a kid, like 23, there was a guy who saw my film and said, I got a project. It has to be done this weekend. We're making a tape for Cannes, and we have this really horrible sitcom, and we need you to cut down 100 hours to a 10-minute piece to sell it. And so I came in and did that. And then the next project was, I need you to direct this 35 millimeter presentation piece that's 15 minutes long and has as much money as you want. And every project it would be, I really like you, but if you screw this up, I can't hire you again. So I always said it was.
And are you still in Virginia at this point?
Still in Virginia.
Okay.
And so he gave me my start. And after about a year of doing commercials and things with him, Discovery Channel called me and wanted me to start producing series for them. And this was way back when it was only one Discovery Channel. Mm-hmm. And so I was 24 and I produced 2 series, but I kept saying I was a director. and they didn't want me to direct. They liked me producing, so I quit, and then they hired me to direct. And about the next 12, 14 years, that's what I did. I sort of caught show us how old I am. We did the very first crime show, which was called New Detectives, right around the OJ case time. And it sort of became this wave of crime shows, at least on Discovery. It was already happening with cop shows, but New Detectives was the show that the creator of CSI was watching and going, boy, this would make a great drama series. Of course, none of us made any money off of it, but he was driving a cab then and saw that show and then created CSI. So I did crime for a long time, 8, 10, 12 different series, couple hundred hours of that. And it's not just doc, it was all the bad reenactments that you see on Discovery Channel. I was responsible for a lot of those. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, I wanted to make movies. That's why I started this, like everybody. And being in Virginia, I was working way more than my friends in LA, but just didn't have the opportunities. And so finally I just said, oh, let me write this script based on a lot of my experiences in the crime world. And I thought I would raise the money myself. So we went about raising the money, and that sort of took us started this road 10 years ago.
And that was Poker Night?
That was Poker Night.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So great. Well, we'll get into the specifics of that. So that's a great story. I'm curious, this is really just an aside, nothing to do with screenwriting. Why are those reenactments so campy? Is it just because you're using non-SAG actors? You're shooting them so quickly? Yeah.
And every show is a little bit different. In the old days, like on Discovery, our budgets were a lot bigger than they are now, because now, like, most of these shows are on Discovery ID, and it's probably at least half the budget of what they used to be. So you've got even less to do more, which is pretty much, I think, a standard across the business right now. But you're getting a lot of lookalikes. So you're cast more because you look like the guy that killed his wife than you are because you're a great actor. You usually end up with, like, it's like the second cop with no dialogue, or the woman that runs the hotel that they interview for one scene. They're amazing, but your leads are all sort of fumbly. There's a lot of great talent. Then the problem is, once you use them, you can't use them again on that show. So you just end up sort of working people through, and, people are all trying hard. I don't think anyone there's a few of them that are definitely supposed to be campy. The rest of them really aren't. And maybe that's part of their charm, but
yeah, I watch. I Almost Got Away with It, which I actually think their reenactments are actually pretty good. But you just mentioned they get people that look similar, and sometimes the people look so similar, you're almost like, gee, is that the actual person?
That's it.
So they do a good job. Yeah, they do a good job on that thing. Okay, so let's talk about Poker Night. Had you written some other scripts? So you started this process 10 years ago. Were you writing feature scripts all throughout this period of doing commercials and working for Discovery?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
I've been writing all my life. I was always a really avid reader as a kid. I'd go through, I would pick books by how long they were, because I read really fast, and I was very voracious all through all my life. I grew up overseas, and so we didn't have TV. It's also a long time ago. I mean, we had TV, but everything was in Chinese, so it wasn't like I would just sit and watch TV. And this was before the VCR when I was a kid. So I would just read, 6, 7 books a week. And then I was writing all the time, a lot of creative writing, and I really enjoyed it. But as I got older, writing is hard. And when I fell into theater and really liked that, and realized I shouldn't be an actor and started directing, I was always looking for something to do as a film, and writing. I did really well in writing classes and enjoyed it. But I also got married really young and had kids, so I was always trying to feed my family. So I wrote probably 3 or 4 scripts, never did anything with them, never sent them out, never tried to go anywhere. Poker Night was the first one that when I finished it, I was like, I could shoot this. And it's a good, I always was like, it's a good B movie that's doable, and it was written for me to direct. And so I thought, if I could get the money, this would be the one to really push for.
Okay, so let's dig into Poker Night a little bit. Maybe you can start out by just giving us a log line. I will link to the trailer in the show notes so people can check that out. But maybe just give us a quick pitch so we kind of have some idea of what this is about for the people that haven't seen it.
Sure. Poker Night is a story of a young detective in a small town He's a very young cop, and he solved a big case, and so he gets promoted to detective, mostly just by his infamy. When you get promoted in that town, you go and play poker that night with a bunch of old retired detectives who sort of give you stories about their time on the force to sort of give you a leg up with maybe some wisdom. When the young detective leaves that night, he ends up getting a call and gets captured by this guy and locked in a basement. And the movie sort of flashes all around between him rehearing those stories at the poker night and then using those stories to find a way to break out and beat this guy that's captured him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. And maybe you can talk a little bit about where did sort of the original genesis of this story idea come from?
It was very true to me. I had no crime background. When I started for Discovery, I had no interest in documentaries or any understanding of what documentaries were. And then that became my whole life. The first two series I did it was an archaeology series and a paleontology series. So I was thrown in on the deep end of some very science heavy and shows that we would go out in the field and figure out the story while we were there. Very pure documentary. By the time we got to crime, we knew the case, and we would interview the people involved and then go back and recreate it with actors. So I was 23 going out and hanging out with these homicide detectives that have been doing this for 20 years. And at that time, there weren't really any positive shows on TV about cops in the documentary format. These guys had only dealt with news anchors and news people. So pretty much they just treated me and the show like we were idiots and very, I was a punk kid with crazy hair. I don't have any hair anymore. And so walking into that world, I felt very, I had nightmares that first year. I would get a lot of these really gruesome crime scene photos and couldn't get out of my head. And I felt a lot like what eventually this character Jeter feels like. But as the years went by, I became so fascinated and so much a part of that world. And you finish your day interviewing a guy that's been doing homicides for 20 years, and you go out for a drink, and he tells you all the things that he's never told anybody, or cases that are crazy, or all these things behind the scenes of the case you just dealt with once it's off the record. And I felt like I was being mentored by these old guys sort of in coming up through crime. And there was a couple points during that run where, I'd be in some small town in Tennessee and they'd tell me about a case, and I could be, I just did a case in Florida 2 months ago where they did something similar. Have you ever heard of this technique? And you start connecting cops across the country, and it was a really unique position. So I learned a lot, and those stories always stood with me. Not necessarily the ones that make the press, but the ones that just where they were smart or clever, or they figured a way around it. And it was a great experience, and that was all sort of what fed into Poker Night.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see how that led to that. That's great, a great story. So I wonder if you can just talk to sort of the aesthetics of the film, or even the story of the film. Were there any other films that influenced it? I mean, it sort of felt like a sort of a Seven vibe. I mean, the non-linear way you were telling the story. People always talk about, Pulp Fiction is telling the story in a non-linear way. What were sort of some of your, just influences when coming up with this?
All of those films. I mean, geez, I'm old and I've been doing TV for a long time. And so you feel like when you finally get a shot, you really want to do your best. And it's like, it was 2 years ago we shot that. I feel like I'm a much better director now than I even was then. But man, we devoured Seven over and over and over. In fact, all of Fincher's films. I don't know that you necessarily see the influences other than it's dark. And definitely any good crime movie. I'm a big fan. Actually, it's funny. Someone described it once as Seven meets Amelie, because I do feel like there's a lot of these Jean-Pierre Jeunet references where you'll go off on a tangent and tell somebody's story in a very, a minute montage in the middle of the film. And I love him. Magnolia was a huge influence. The early Paul Thomas Anderson films. This film pales in so much comparison to those. But those are the guys that I love and that we tried to emulate in a B-movie format.
Yeah. So, I was a little confused at first when you had the young detective kind of in the memories of these older detectives as they're telling them. The first one, I was a little confused. By the second one, I got that. But where did that idea come from to sort of, infuse him in there? I thought it was an interesting thing, and I can't honestly think of any time where I had seen that.
Yeah. The movie plays fast and loose with a lot of different things like that, where I would say stylistically we do some cheats. One of those, I love the idea because as you're listening to a story, if you really want to learn from it, you might picture yourself in that position. And then also I just thought, especially when I first wrote it, I was like, we're going to be lucky to get any cool actor to be sitting at that poker table. And if we do, we probably won't be able to have them for very long. And so this would be a great device to have them start telling the story. And then we can have the young actor take over, and I don't have as many days with them. That was a big part of it as a budget constraint.
Yeah, it's smart.
And we were at that time, we were like, man, if I could just, if we could get old TV cops like Columbo or Magnum PI or, guys that, or James Garner, that was like my dream at first. People that maybe, because I was like, if they're just sitting around and not doing anything, maybe we can get those guys. And those guys would have all been amazing. The guys we got ended up were really great too. But it is a device that takes a second. And I don't know, that was probably the other fascination I have is mystery box films. And I love, Memento is one of my all-time favorites. And I have probably too much of a fetish for being confused when I watch a film. I love that feeling of trying to catch up, and maybe too much because there are some things that are confusing. But I like the audience having to figure it out. And I do feel like after the first one, you sort of get the device.
Yeah. No, totally. There were some really good twists too that I liked in the film, and I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that. I don't necessarily want to spoil the specific twist. As I was thinking about our interview, it's like I was torn. Should we talk about specific twists? But let's not necessarily talk about the specific ones, but maybe you can just talk about your process on how you come up with it. I've written some of these scripts too, where you have twists, and for me, it's just literally a banging your head against the wall. There doesn't seem to be any sort of moments of inspiration, but how did you come up with the twist? Do you kind of get to a point and then, there's a lightning bolt? What is your process for coming up with these interesting twists?
Yeah, I wish that probably all of us wish that it was something we could turn on and off. I have a bad habit of not, it works really well when it works. And when it doesn't, you end up with a lot of things that don't work, of not outlining and not planning what I'm going to do. So the first 30 pages of Poker Night were written fast, like in 3 days, and then it sat there for 3 months. And then you start working on it again and a little bit more and a little bit more, but I never knew where it was going, other than I kind of knew if I had 3 stories told at the table and 3 times he tries to escape, that gave me a little bit of a structure. But when I got to the end, I still was like, I don't know. And so each time something would happen, or I would see something else. And then, of course, I had 10 years to sit with it. I would just come up with something else and go back and rewrite it and try and integrate it in. But it was no bolt of lightning, or I guess it was a bolt of lightning when it would happen, but it was just a lot of banging my head against the wall.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I think that's just what the process is. So let's take a step back and just talk about how you got this film made. I get a lot of people emailing me saying, I've written this script and, I want to make it myself. I want to get it. I want to produce it myself. So let's just talk about that process. So we're 10 years ago, you've written this script, and what was and really some of the specifics, what did you start to do to make this actually happen?
Probably I said before, I'm a pretty voracious reader. At that time, the heroes of independent film in the late or early 90s, like Spike Lee, Kevin Smith, a lot of these guys that I sort of worshiped. I probably read every single article in Indie Film Magazine and Premiere Magazine at that time, all the old stuff. So I had an encyclopedic knowledge of everybody's story and how they got there. I just didn't know how to do it for myself. What I did know was you need money. And so when we finished it, my buddy and I, who at this point we did a bunch of stuff for Discovery. We did a bunch of stuff in China. We've been doing commercials, and we're like, let's just see if we can do this. And I had a friend that knew some rich people that said, why don't you come talk to them? I'll set it up at my restaurant. And I'd never pitched to anybody, and I'm a pretty straightforward guy. So we started sitting with these rich people, and by rich people, I mean a lot of millions. And I would say, here's the script to this film. I don't think you'll probably like it. I don't even know if your kids will like it, but there's a group out there that I do think will like it. And it's not a lot of money. We have a lot of experience. But if we screw it up, you can always put the DVD in and show your friends how you lost all your money. And we met with a lot of people, and eventually we got about $1 million, which was crazy. So I thought we were going to make this movie. And
so now, just to clarify, so you've met with this one rich couple. You continue to meet with other wealthy people over the course of several years. And how did you get some of those additional meetings set up?
We actually met with everybody probably in a 2-3 month span, and all of a sudden we had $1 million. And
how did you get those meetings? You just kept talking to your friends. Do you know anybody that would want to invest in a movie?
It was that, and it was in a small town. And so word spread that we were these weird kids from Virginia trying to make a movie. And
you're still in Virginia while you're doing this?
We lived in Virginia, but we moved. Okay. Well, we were meeting with people in the Midwest. And then once we got $1 million, we're like, because part of our pitch too was we're going to film the movie here in this town, this little tiny town of 3,000 people. So once we had $1 million, I thought, well, we're probably going to make it. We're halfway there. So we moved there. And then I realized I needed to get some LA money. So we came out and started meeting with people here. And it was we met with every bottom feeder, every shady. If you really don't care about your investors and you just want to screw them over, there's a lot of people here willing to take that money and screw them over. But because we had some money, we had a little bit, we could at least get meetings. Mm-hmm. And through that, I met a guy who was an amazing producer. At the time, he was just starting to break as a line producer. And he had done the whole 10 yards with Bruce Willis, and he was getting ready to do World's Fastest Indian with Anthony Hopkins. He had me come out and work on that a couple weeks, and was going into the Wild with Sean Penn. So he read the script in the middle of the night on location and was like, I love it. And I want to put this together. And I was like, great. And then, sorry, am I still doing all right?
Yeah, no, this is great. This is fascinating stuff. And I think this is the kind of, but these sorts of intricate details, I think, help people just get a sense of the scope of the effort that it takes to make an independent film. So this is interesting stuff. Don't hesitate at all.
Okay. So and now at this time I'd left all of my work to go do this. So we're about 8 months in, and because we already had $1 million, I thought we were pretty well set, but I have 2 kids and a wife, so we're getting down to zero. So we went to Puerto Rico for the summer to help the U.S. government put satellite dishes in on top of schools, every school in Puerto Rico. So I don't know what I make in a day, but it's the hardest work I've ever done in my life. My little director hands were all calloused, and it was hard work. So I'm in Puerto Rico, and this producer calls me, and he goes, hey, guess what? Sam Jackson just read your script, and he wants to do the movie. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I'm on set with a guy. He was filming a movie in London at this time, or no, somewhere in Wales. And he goes, the second unit director did all the Star Wars movies. He was the swordsman. And he got it to Sam, and Sam loves it and wants to do it. I was like, that's amazing. And he goes, but Sam wants his buddy to direct it. And I was like, well, tell Sam, screw you. And I was like, this is kind of cool and also horrible. And then a week later, he called me and he said, Hayden Christensen wants to do it. And they're both on set in London right now for reshoots on Star Wars, quoting the movie. And I was like, what? But they both want their buddy to direct it. So after a long time of soul searching, I was like, well, it's the first one. I could be on as a producer and still be writer. So I said, okay, let's do it. And the movie got greenlit, and it moved from 2 different companies to finally ending up at Icon. Mel Gibson's company, and budget went up to $10 million. We had a start date. I gave all my money back to my investors, and we started this waiting game for the two of their schedules to open up. And that was about a year. So I think we were set for August 2006 to start shooting, and all the money was in the bank. They already pre-sold it at Cannes. And in June, I think it was June of 2006, we got a call, and they both were offered Jumper, that Doug Liman movie. It was horrible. But it was a $120 million movie, and they both were making more money than our entire budget, and they left the project. So I think I was given 3 names by Icon that I could get. I don't remember any of them except Ryan Reynolds at the time. And I was done, and actually I got called by Proactive, the acne medicine, and I went to China for 2 years and did commercials for them in China. And during that time, then Hayden was really attached to the project and optioned it twice over that time. And after I was done in China, they moved us to San Francisco, and I started directing all the domestic Proactive commercials. So I worked with the celebrities and, Katy Perry and Justin Bieber and these guys. And so it was good training and fun, and the best money I've ever made. And the movie just kind of kept going. At a certain point, I finally said, I'm not optioning it to anyone anymore, unless I'm going to direct it. So that took us so we shot 2012, like December 2011. So we finished the script in 2004. It was going to go in 2006. In 2011, at the very end of the year, I got a call from a guy out here who'd been bugging me over the years about the script, who's always really liked it. But I just wasn't sure about him. And along the path, there were 3 or 4 people that were willing to meet with me as director, but very, very dicey people too. And so I kind of came to a point where I was like, it doesn't really matter, I guess, what my opinion is about our financiers. You should just get it done because it's sat around forever. And so there was still, like I said, there was plenty of interest. In fact, I was still getting meetings off the script. I had way more meetings as a writer. When it first blew up, it was really big. I had probably 40 meetings all over town, and did a lot of takes on different material. But I realized it was way harder to make it as a writer than director, and I still need to pay bills. But anyways, finally this one guy who owns a post house here in LA said, we're going to make it this year with you directing it. And I was like, sure we are. I didn't really believe it. We didn't sign anything. He just kept going, nope, it's going to happen. And September of 2012, he was working on another film up in Canada, and he flew me up, and I was on set, and John Stockwell was directing that. And I was like, oh, it's legitimate. They've got a few actors up here. There's trailers, there's equipment, a crew. So I finally was like, maybe this will happen. And then sure enough, about a month later, we flew up there and we shot the film. So, but it took, I guess that was 8 years then. It'll be 10 years now.
Yeah. So, well, that's a great story. A story in perseverance. I want to just touch on one thing you mentioned as you were going through this process. So you raised $1 million in this small town from the wealthy people in this small town. And then you made the comment, I needed LA money. Why didn't you think, especially 8 or now 10 years ago, why didn't you think you couldn't just shoot this thing for $1 million and call it a day?
That's a great question. And, it was something that I also, once we sort of tapped out, I think, the resources of the people in that area. At first I said, why don't you guys just all double your investment when you start shooting? And they were like, no way. And then
so you were trying to get the bottom line was your budget at that point was set at $2 million and you had $1 million.
Granted, this is 2006. So think about, we're just barely like the best digital camera at this time was the Vericam. There was no red. There was no digital revolution. The only way it could still be made was on film. I did actually go back and pitch I've redone the budget at 1.2 and we could shoot it on Vericam, which is a new format, and it'll have a different look, but it could really work. And I think they really felt look, we're giving you the base to go out and get that extra money, so there's some legitimacy to it. So go get that money. And then
so the investors wanted a higher production value film is kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, and there weren't, I mean, besides people doing things on their credit cards, there weren't a lot of low budget movies being made. I mean, it's not like today where everybody can make a film for a couple $100,000. Back then, there weren't people really doing that unless it was a credit card movie, a talkie movie. And when you see Poker Night, part of the problem is, I mean, I think there's 254 scenes and it's like 126 pages. It was way long, and a ton of the physical production was very difficult. So it wasn't something that was really simple to go out and do. So we felt pretty good about that number. I think that if it was done today, it would be a much smaller film, or a much cheaper film.
Okay, so I'm curious too, and I think just from talking to you, I think maybe some of the answer has kind of already come out, but I'd just be curious to hear your take on this. I get a lot of writers coming to my site, and when they're pitching their sort of idea and their script, it's very clearly like a Sundance, independent Sundance art house film. And I always tell them, there's really, despite the sort of the huge once a year hit that comes out of Sundance, there's not really a market for these types of films. Poker Night is obviously a genre film. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you just like this type of film, but I'm wondering how conscious you were of that when you were, writing it and trying to raise money, that this is a film. And you even sort of said it to the investors. You may not like it, your kids may not like it, but I think there's a genre. Just how conscious of you are of the potential market for a film when you started writing this script?
Somewhat conscious. I mean, I know that there are a lot of writers that really hedge their bets and look at certain things or try to follow trends. And it wasn't anything like that. I knew the crime world. I knew the stories in that world. And I also knew that it was pretty popular. Most people like crime, different than a Sundance film. And at this time, this is still in the days of Blockbuster. You go, I could walk every aisle of Blockbuster and see crappy thrillers everywhere or really bad crime shows. I remember, this will show you how long ago it was, because we had $1 million and we thought we were getting ready to shoot. And I started seeing the trailers for Saw. And I was like, oh my gosh, another movie with a guy trapped in a basement. This is going to be horrible. And that spawned this whole long genre, which is hilarious now that someone will say, oh, they're trying to be like Saw. And obviously we were written way before Saw, but we're the tail end of sort of, if it would have come out then, it was probably a little bit closer to when that stuff was hot. But I mean, I only knew genre films, horror, crime, thriller. There's always an audience, and people like that. You don't always want to turn on a Sundance movie, but seems like there's always an audience for these kind of films. And so I was conscious of that. I thought at least on DVD, we probably could make our money back.
Yeah. So, and what's kind of next? Have you gotten a sense now that this movie is done? Has it gotten you some meetings? Do you feel like this is going to sort of propel your career to the next level? What's sort of next in your mind? Are you writing some new scripts?
We're working on a couple new scripts. Been working on. I'm still working in crime TV.
Okay.
I'm on my 3rd series this year already. And there are opportunities that are coming as a result of it. It's been a nice push here this last few weeks because it was relatively quiet up till now. But truthfully, probably as anybody in this business, I just feel really lucky and blessed to have even gotten this far. And now that I've made a film and just see, man, TV's so much more straightforward than film in a certain sense. It's just a long, long, hard road. But it's amazing. I'm just very lucky, and would love to be lucky again and get another shot at it. But very thankful for what we've been able to do.
For sure. So maybe you can tell us how people can see Poker Night, sort of the release dates. Is it going to get a theatrical release, maybe video on demand, maybe some of those dates and stuff, so people can catch it if they want to check it out?
Sure. It's up on video on demand starting today. That's December 5th. I think except on Time Warner. I don't know why yet. It's on direct, I know. It hits iTunes next week, the week of, is that the 12th?
Yeah, the 8th is Monday, so yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Next week. And in New York, there's a free screening on the 15th from Fangoria magazine that they're hosting there in New York City. It opens in LA on the 20th.
Okay.
And then I'm sure it's coming to DVD after that.
Yeah, for sure. What's the best way for people to keep up with you? And if they just want to follow along with what you're doing or potentially contact you, maybe if you have a Twitter handle, you can mention that, a blog, a Facebook page, anything like that.
Sure. I'm Greg Francis on Facebook. I got a luchador picture there by my name. I'm Mr. Greg Francis at Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, you can bug me anywhere.
Perfect. I'll put all that in the show notes. Well, you've been very generous with your time. This has been a great interview. As I said, I think there's a lot of good information, and I think people will get a lot of value out of this. So thank you very much for coming on.
It's all cool. Oh, just one last thing. And
sure.
I'm sure that you probably, because you get all kinds of stories from all different people, but like 10 years is not crazy. There's so many people with independent films, and it takes that long. Unless you are independently wealthy or you're just brilliant. And I was neither. But it takes a lot of perseverance. And so just be encouraged. There's so much stuff to wade through, and there's so many things that have to happen. And I wish that I could say, on one hand, it's because I'm more talented than other people, or I was a better writer than other people, or these things. The sad, I think, reality of our business is it's not based on much of that. I think it's based on the right thing at the right time with the right people getting involved. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing. So just because you're a really great writer, I know so many people that are better writers than me. I just happened to get really lucky to lock into something that got people's attention for the right time. So don't give up and don't stop writing. And don't get down when you feel like this was really good. I don't know why it didn't go. I feel like the other side of the great thing about being a director is I see hundreds of actors, and it's not usually the best audition in the room, but I'll tell you, I always remember the best audition. And you might have the best script right now, and people pass and they don't do anything, but they're going to remember you, and they're going to remember what you wrote. And so if you keep going, the next project might be it, or they have something they need to rewrite on. So I know it can be discouraging and it's easy to get down, but I would really encourage you, don't give up. And if you feel like this is what you want to do, really keep going, because the longer you're in the business, the more people fall away and the more opportunities will be there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just great advice. And I think people that are new to the business, they don't understand how true what you just said really is people always think, oh, I'm this super talent and it'll be a meteoric rise to the top. And, after you've been in it for a while, you know that, it's not quite that simple. It's a very complex equation. And, I have a film that I wrote in 1999, and it took the guy 10 years. I optioned it in 1999 to this guy, and it literally took him 10 years to get it made. So those stories are not uncommon. One common thread, and I think you're definitely part of that I do see on a lot of these podcasts, is a lot of people in your sort of situation, they started out by going out and making that first independent film. And that's the other thing I always tell people. It's like one of the single biggest thing that separates people is just taking action and not sitting around. You know, you went out and you made an independent film, now it's probably 20 years ago, but, and it didn't really, quote, go anywhere. It wasn't a big hit, but it got things rolling. And people don't realize too how subtle you just start taking action. And no, it's not going to be the next Memento or the next Brothers McMullen or the next Clerks, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. It gets the ball rolling in very small, subtle ways. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying.
And especially now with the ease you can do everything yourself for so little, mm-hmm. and it still looks so good. This is the greatest time in the world. I mean, the other problem is that's why Sundance has 13,000 films for 100 slots each year, but you've got an opportunity that no one else, I mean, we never had it because you had to pay for film, pay for a camera. It was so cost prohibitive. And now you could go out with your friends and shoot something very simply, like Clerks could have been done for a couple $100 now with the right writer. And so do that. You're absolutely right. You take control of your career now by yourself. You don't need all these other people. And even if it doesn't get out or get the attention, you're so far ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. So well, great conversation, and I really do appreciate you. I really enjoyed your film, so I hope it's a big success, and I hope other people will check it out.
Really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for bugging me.
Hey, thank you, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right, man. We'll talk soon, Ashley. Bye.
Just a quick plug for my email and fax blast query service. All the options and the sales and the writing assignments that I've had in the last 18 months were all a direct result of my own email and fax blast service. And I offer this service to member of SYS Select. Here's how it works. First, you join SYS Select. Then you post your logline and query letter in the SYS Select forum. I review your logline and query letter and help you make them as good as they possibly can be. Then you purchase the blast and I send it out for you. The emails are sent as if they're from your email address, so all replies go back directly to you. You can exclude companies if there are specific companies you don't want to send to for whatever reason. To learn more about this, just check out www.sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. In the next episode of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Tanya Bhattacharya. Tanya is a television writer. We talk about how she broke into the business and how she's been able to maintain a successful career over the years. So if you're interested in writing for TV, you're not going to want to miss this episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Greg. I think the main takeaway for me is just the determination and perseverance that it took Greg to get this movie made. So often we hear these great stories where someone seems to come out of nowhere and sell their script, and almost overnight they're the talk of Hollywood. Those are great stories, and it's fantastic if it happens to you. I certainly hope it does, but most of the time that's just not how things happen. So whatever you do, don't give up. You might have to persevere for 10 years or more. There's that old saying, the overnight success took 10 years, and I really think there's a lot of truth in that. I'm also reminded of a story. I think I even mentioned this on the podcast before, and I'm not sure where I originally heard it. I think it was actually from Tim Ferriss, who's famous for the book, The 4-Hour Workweek. The idea is that when you're trying to learn something, looking at the people who are at the absolute top of the profession may not be the most helpful way to actually get better at that skill. For instance, if you're trying to improve your golf game, watching Tiger Woods may not actually make you a better golfer. He can physically do things with his body that most people simply can't do, and that most people probably includes you as well. So trying to learn golf from him isn't the best way to become a better golfer. But looking at the guy who's ranked maybe say like 100 in the world, who's not just gloriously gifted, is actually a better way to learn a skill. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from these types of working professionals because their talent level is probably a lot closer to your own. And one of the things that's made them successful is just being hardworking. Bringing this back to film, there's guys like Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan who are just gloriously gifted, and I'm not sure those are really the guys most of us should be trying to emulate. Looking at someone like that might not be nearly as beneficial to getting better as looking at someone closer to your own talent level, but who is actually having some success. I had a conversation a few months ago with a fellow screenwriter who's trying to produce his own independent feature film. He was looking at My Big Fat Greek Wedding as a sort of a template. And honestly, I'm not sure you can really learn a lot from that film. Yeah, it was a good film, and obviously it was super successful, but at the end of the day, I think it just needed an enormous amount of luck to do what it did, and luck isn't really something you can engineer. And I hope that's some of what I'm doing with this podcast. Greg just chipped away at getting his movie made for years and years, and eventually he got it made. I really think you're better off looking at films like the ones we talk about on this podcast, where they might not be super big hits, but they are recouping their costs. That's actually a business model that you can make work, and it doesn't require being uber talented or super lucky, which are both things you can't ultimately control. It does obviously require a lot of hard work. That is the only downside. So on that note, that is our show. I really do appreciate everyone who listens to the podcast. Thank you, everyone. This is the last podcast of the year. I really hope you found some value out of it, and I hope it's helped you improve your writing career at least a little bit. So please be safe and have a great new year. Once again, thank you for listening.